February 2026 is Black History Month, a time this country claims is about truth, reflection, and public engagement with Black history. Yet for people and communities like mine on Maryland's Lower Eastern Shore, especially in Wicomico County, this month keeps exposing a contradiction that cannot be ignored. Black history is celebrated, but the truths that complicate it are avoided. This is not abstract to me. I am actively doing research right now on indigenous erasure, racial reclassification, and the historical absorption of indigenous descendants into the category Black through law, census practices, land policy, and colonial governance. This is lived reality here. Families carry indigenous lineage that was never lost. It was reassigned, not by culture, not by consent, by paperwork, policy, and administrative convenience. And while I am studying conflict analysis and dispute resolution at Salisbury University, in a program that claims to examine power, identity, systems, and structural conflict, I am also living the contradiction of what happens when institutions get uncomfortable with histories that disrupt clean narratives. Salisbury carries a European name honoring colonial lineage, while sitting inside Wicomico County, a place branded home of the Indians. Indigenous symbols get displayed. Indigenous names get preserved on paper. Yet indigenous descendants, especially those reclassified as Black, remain unrecognized in records, resources, and historical accounting. This is not coincidence, it is design. Now let us talk about what happened in Salisbury, Maryland, from start to finish. Not the softened version, not the museum plaque version, the real version. In early December 1931, a 23-year-old Black laborer named Matthew Williams was employed by a white man named Daniel Shipley in Wicomico County. Williams and Shipley got into a physical altercation. The confrontation escalated beyond words. Gunfire erupted. Accounts describe that Williams was shot twice and Shipley was shot during the exchange. Williams was wounded, bleeding, and disoriented. He did not disappear. He did not hide. He was physically compromised for hours after being shot. Later that day, Daniel Shipley died from his wounds. At that point, the situation became lethal not because of evidence or trial, but because of race. Word spread through Salisbury that a Black man had been involved in a violent confrontation with a white man who later died. That was enough. Matthew Williams was taken into custody and transported to Peninsula General Hospital in Salisbury. He was placed in a hospital bed for treatment. He was injured. He was weak. He had not been tried. He had not been convicted. That hospital still exists today under a revised name and branding as Tidal Health Peninsula Regional. Same city, same institution, new name. As Williams lay wounded in that hospital bed, white residents began gathering outside. The crowd grew rapidly. Hundreds turned into over 1,000 white people, men, women, teenagers, and families. This was not chaos. This was a white mob forming with purpose. They were not asking for a court date. They were not asking for facts. They were demanding violence. Hospital administrators knew the crowd was there. Law enforcement knew the crowd was there. Yet no meaningful protective force was put in place. Instead of defending a patient in their care, hospital leadership chose compliance. A hospital official told the mob that if they were going to take him, they should do it quietly. That is not neutrality. That is permission. The mob entered the hospital. Matthew Williams was pulled from his bed. He was dragged to a second-story window. His injured body was thrown out of that window and lowered down into the arms of the white thugs waiting below. This was physical force applied to a wounded man. From there, the mob marched him through the streets of Salisbury. They took him to the Wicomico County Courthouse, the symbolic center of law and authority in the county. That courthouse still stands today in downtown Salisbury. Police were present. Traffic was controlled. The mob was not stopped. This was not a failure of policing. This was policing choosing order for the mob over protection for a Black man. On the courthouse lawn, the violence escalated again. Matthew Williams was beaten. He was stabbed repeatedly. Then he was hanged from a tree on courthouse grounds. And local institutions were not innocent bystanders. The public record identifies leadership involvement. Police Chief Nicholas H. Holland is named as helping lead the mob from the hospital to the courthouse. Fire Chief Frederick Greer Jr. is named as providing the rope used to hang Matthew Williams. Firefighters were present while his body burned. They did not intervene. The same department connected to supplying the rope stood by. After the hanging, the mob was still not finished. They cut his body down. They tied it to a vehicle. They dragged his body through black neighborhoods so black families would see exactly what happened. Then they burned him. His body was soaked in fuel and set on fire in public. That same night, another black man was beaten to death in Salisbury. His name was never properly recorded. That is how erasure works. First the brutality, then the paperwork silence. After all of this, no one was charged, despite hundreds of witnesses, despite public participation, despite police and fire involvement. A grand jury claimed there was insufficient evidence. That is not confusion. That is the system protecting itself. And the rope matters because the evidence was treated like a trophy. The rope used in the lynching remained in Wicomico County custody for decades and was only removed after public confrontation with its transfer to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, where a preserved segment of the lynch rope used to hang Matthew Williams is part of the collection, occurring in 2021, nearly 90 years later. 90 years of a community living with the artifact of terror, still treated as someone's possession instead of a public reckoning. The hospital still exists. The courthouse still exists. The institution survived. Black people survived too. In the Georgetown neighborhood, a black-built church founded in 1838 still stands today. John Wesley Methodist Episcopal Church, later known as the Charles H. Chipman Cultural Center, remains proof that black people built life, faith, and community here, even while white thugs enforced terror. And now look at how the city chooses to remember. A mural of Frederick Douglass placed on a Purdue chicken processing facility. A black freedom icon used as decoration on corporate concrete. A playground named Black Lives Matter Park on the same street where that black-built church still stands. A playground in a city where a wounded black man was thrown from a hospital window. In a city where police and fire leadership helped a mob carry out a lynching. In a city where a courthouse lawn became an execution site. That is not remembrance. That is branding. That is aesthetic distraction standing in for accountability. This is why my research matters. This is why the work I am doing on indigenous erasure and racial reclassification matters. Because the same system that could throw a wounded black man out of a hospital window and burn him on courthouse ground is the same system that could later engineer identities through paperwork, erase lineages, and then call it history. Black History Month cannot be sanitized. Silence is not neutral. Selective memory is violence. Matthew Williams deserves truth. The unnamed man beaten to death that night deserves truth. And this community deserves a history that is not curated for comfort. Recognition without truth is performance. Truth is the minimum requirement for reconciliation.